I am Sarah Jenkins, 54 years old, and I just watched my husband hand over the deed to my $5 million estate to the one person I trusted most in this world. Before I tell you how I managed to keep my eyes closed while my heart was shattering into a million pieces, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. I need to know there are still real, honest people out there. The digital clock on the nightstand read 2:14 a.m. The red numbers seemed to burn into my eyelids, even though they were squeezed shut. I was lying in the master bedroom of the house my parents had built brick by brick, the house I had inherited and turned into a legacy. But right now, it didn't feel like a home. It felt like a crime scene. My heart was hammering against my ribs so hard I was terrified the sound alone would give me away. Thump. 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 I forced myself to breathe through my nose, slow, shallow breaths, the way I used to when I was a little girl pretending to be asleep so Santa wouldn't catch me. But there was no Santa here tonight. Just a monster sleeping next to me. Or rather, not sleeping. Mark, my husband of 20 years, was shifting on the bed. I felt the mattress depress as he sat up. He paused, waiting. He was listening to my breathing. I kept my rhythm steady, adding a tiny, soft snore at the end of an exhale, just like I had practiced earlier that afternoon in front of the mirror. "Sarah," he whispered. It was barely a breath. I didn't move a muscle. I let my jaw go slack, my body heavy and limp. He poked my shoulder. Hard. It took every ounce of willpower not to flinch. My instincts were screaming at me to slap his hand away, to sit up and scream, "I know what you're doing." But I couldn't. Not yet. I had poured that cup of chamomile tea, the one he insisted on making me every single night for the past 3 months, down the bathroom sink while the shower was running. I was wide awake, fueled by adrenaline and a rage so cold it made me shiver under the duvet. Satisfied that I was unconscious, Mark slid out of bed. The floorboards creaked softly, a sound I used to love because it meant this house had history. Now, it just sounded like a warning. I cracked my right eye open, just a sliver. The room was bathed in moonlight filtering through the curtains. I watched his silhouette move to the closet. He wasn't moving like a man getting a glass of water. He was moving with purpose. He pulled on a pair of jeans, not bothering with a shirt. Then, he went to the safe hidden behind the painting of the seashore, a painting I had bought for our 10th anniversary. My stomach twisted. I knew the combination. He knew I knew it. But lately, he had told me I was too confused to handle our finances, that my memory was failing. He spun the dial. Click. He pulled out a thick manila folder. Even in the dark, I recognized it. It was the deed to the estate. The legal papers for the Jenkins family farm and the surrounding 100 acres of prime development land. Where was he going? He didn't leave the room. Instead, he walked toward the French doors that led to the balcony. He unlocked them quietly. A draft of cold November air swept into the room, chilling my exposed arm, but I remained frozen. He wasn't going out. He was letting someone in. A figure stepped out of the shadows of the balcony. A woman. She was wearing a dark hoodie, pulled up, but as she stepped into the slice of moonlight, the hood fell back. I almost gagged. It was Emily. My baby sister. My little sister, who I had paid tuition for. Who I had bailed out of debt 3 times. Who I had held while she cried over her divorce last year. Emily was standing in my bedroom at 2:17 a.m., smiling at my husband. "Is she out?" Emily whispered. Her voice wasn't soft with concern, it was sharp, impatient. Like a light, Mark whispered back, a smirk audible in his tone. "Double dose tonight. She won't wake up until noon tomorrow, if at all. The vet said this stuff is strong enough to put a horse down for surgery." The vet? They were giving me animal tranquilizers? The horror washed over me, cold and slimy. I felt sick, physically sick, but I dug my fingernails into my palms under the covers, using the pain to ground myself. Did you get it? Emily asked, greedy hands reaching out. Mark handed her the folder. The deed. The power of attorney. And the updated will. It's all here, Em. Once we get her thumbprint on the transfer page, the property is legally under my management, and then we transfer the title to the holding company in your name. God, finally, Emily sighed, clutching the papers to her chest like they were a newborn baby. I am so sick of playing the supportive sister. Do you know how hard it is to listen to her whine about her foggy brain every day? It's pathetic. It's almost over, babe, Mark said. He reached out and touched her cheek. A touch so intimate, so familiar, it made my skin crawl. He had never touched me like that in years. Once we sell the land to the developers, we take the $5 million and we are gone. Mexico, the Caymans, wherever you want. And Sarah? Emily glanced toward the bed. What happens to her? Mark shrugged, a gesture of pure indifference that hurt more than a slap. We put her in that state-run facility. With her medical record showing rapid cognitive decline and dementia, no one will question it. She'll just be another crazy old lady mumbling about how she used to be rich. You're brilliant, Emily giggled. She leaned in and kissed him. My husband. My sister. Kissing in my bedroom, holding the deed to my parents' land, planning to lock me away in an asylum. The rage that exploded in my chest was blinding. It wasn't just anger, it was a primal, protective fury. This land wasn't just dirt and grass. It was my father's sweat. It was my mother's garden. It was my life's work. I wanted to sit up. I wanted to grab the heavy brass lamp on the nightstand and smash it over Mark's head. I wanted to scream until the neighbors 3 miles away heard me. My muscles tensed. I was ready to spring. I was ready to end this right now. No. A voice inside my head, sharp and cold, sounding suspiciously like my late father's, stopped me. Stop, Sarah. Think. If I sat up now, what would happen? It would be my word against theirs. They were 2, I was 1. Mark was strong. Emily was vicious. And physically, I was still weak from months of whatever poison they had been feeding me. If I confronted them now, they might just finish the job. They might use a pillow to smother me and call it a heart attack. And even if I survived the night, what proof did I have? I had poured the tea down the drain. The cup was clean. If I called the police, Mark would say I was hallucinating again. He had spent 3 months carefully planting the seeds of my insanity with our friends, our doctor, even the local sheriff. Poor Sarah, he'd say. She's losing her mind. If I woke up now, I would lose everything. I needed more than a confrontation. I needed total destruction. I needed to catch them in a way they couldn't wiggle out of. I needed to see them in handcuffs. I forced my muscles to relax. I forced my breathing to stay slow and rhythmic. I watched through my eyelashes as Mark pulled Emily closer, his hand sliding down her back. Go, Mark whispered. Take the papers to the safe deposit box first thing in the morning. We'll do the thumbprint tomorrow night. I need to make sure she's really out of it. Love you, Emily whispered. Love you too, he replied. Emily slipped back out through the balcony doors. Mark locked them, put the folder back in the safe, empty now, except for the decoy papers, and climbed back into bed. He lay down next to me, the man who had promised to love and cherish me, the man who was actively poisoning me. He turned his back to me and was asleep within minutes. I lay there in the darkness, staring at the ceiling, tears finally leaking from the corners of my eyes, sliding hot into my ears. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I spent the next 4 hours planning. I planned my survival. I planned my vengeance. I wasn't the victim they thought I was. They thought they were dealing with a confused, sick, lonely old woman. They forgot that I was a Jenkins. They forgot that I had run this farm through droughts and recessions. By the time the sun began to rise, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple, the Sarah who had gone to bed the night before was gone. The woman who woke up was cold, calculating, and ready for war. But to understand how I let it get this far, how I missed the signs, I have to take you back. Back to when the fog started. 3 months ago, my life was perfect. Or at least, the glossy, American dream version of perfect that you see in magazines. We had just celebrated our 20th anniversary. Mark had surprised me with a trip to Napa Valley. We drank wine, we laughed, we held hands. I remember looking at him across the dinner table at a vineyard, thinking, how did I get so lucky? I was the sole owner of the Jenkins estate. After my parents passed away in a car accident 5 years ago, I took over the family business, a high-end organic produce supplier and wedding venue. The business was booming. The property value had skyrocketed as the town expanded, making our land a goldmine. Mark, a real estate agent who hadn't closed a significant deal in 2 years, was always supportive. He managed the household, or so he said, while I ran the empire. It started on a Tuesday in September. A simple headache. Not a sharp pain, but a dull, heavy pressure behind my eyes. I thought it was just stress from the harvest season. Here, honey, Mark had said that evening, walking into the living room with a steaming mug. I found this new herbal blend at the organic market. It's supposed to be great for stress and cognitive health. Chamomile, valerian root, and some ancient Chinese herbs. It smelled earthy, sweet, and comforting. You're the best, I said, taking a sip. It was bitter, but the honey masked it well enough. Within 30 minutes, I felt heavy. My limbs felt like lead. I went to bed at 8 p.m. and slept for 12 hours. When I woke up the next morning, I felt like I was wading through molasses. My brain was foggy. I couldn't remember where I had put my glasses. You left them in the microwave, Sarah, Mark said, chuckling as he handed them to me. The microwave? I frowned. Why would I do that? I don't know, babe. You were pretty out of it last night. Maybe you're working too hard. I laughed it off. Everyone has brain farts, right? But it kept happening. Every night, Mark would bring me the tea. Every morning, I would wake up feeling less like myself. The fog grew thicker. I started forgetting appointments. I missed a crucial meeting with a distributor. I forgot my own phone number at the pharmacy. Then came the humiliation. It was Thanksgiving. A month into the sickness. We were hosting dinner for about 15 people, Mark's friends, some neighbors, and of course, Emily. I had spent all day preparing the turkey, fighting through the dizziness that had become my constant companion. I felt shaky, my hands trembling as I set the table. Sarah, are you okay? Mrs. Gable, our next-door neighbor, asked. She was a kind, sharp-eyed woman who had known me since I was in diapers. You look pale, dear. Just a little tired, I smiled weakly. When it was time to carve the turkey, I went to the drawer to get the electric carving knife. It wasn't there. I checked the dishwasher. The pantry. Nothing. Mark? I called out. Have you seen the carving knife? Mark walked into the kitchen, a look of concern etched on his handsome face. Sarah, you put it away. Remember? I don't think I did. Honey, he said, loud enough for the guests in the dining room to hear. We talked about this. You put it in the garage freezer. You said you wanted to keep it cold. The freezer? I stared at him. That makes no sense. He sighed, a long, suffering sigh. He walked to the garage and came back holding the knife, frosted over. See? It's okay. I know you're struggling lately. He looked at the guests with a sad, apologetic smile. She's been having these episodes. We're seeing a specialist next week. I stood there, humiliated, tears stinging my eyes. I didn't remember putting the knife in the freezer. Why would I do that? Was I losing my mind? Was I getting early onset dementia like my aunt? The fear was a cold knot in my stomach. Emily rushed over, wrapping an arm around me. "Oh, Sarah," she cooed. "Don't worry. We're here for you. Mark is taking such good care of you." I looked at my sister. She was wearing a new dress, expensive silk. She looked radiant, while I felt gray and withered. "I feel like I'm going crazy, I whispered. "Shoo," she patted my hair. "Just relax. Mark has everything under control. Maybe you should sign over the day-to-day business stuff to him for a while? Just until you get better." That was the first time they planted the seed. Sign it over. The gaslighting ramped up after that. Keys turned up in the sugar jar. Important documents I swore I filed were found in the trash can. I started to doubt my own reality. I stopped driving because I was terrified I would forget which pedal was the brake. I stopped going to the office because I couldn't handle the pitying looks from my employees. I became a prisoner in my own home, a prisoner of my own failing mind. And Mark was the warden, benevolent and kind, bringing me my tea every night. "Drink up," he'd say, kissing my forehead. "It will help you sleep. Sleep is what the brain needs to heal." I trusted him. God, I trusted him. He was my husband. He was supposed to be my protector. But the most painful betrayal wasn't the tea. It was the emotional isolation. Mark started telling me that my friends were asking uncomfortable questions, that they didn't want to visit because it was too sad to see me like this. He told me Emily was the only one who really understood. So I clung to them. I clung to the two people holding the shovel, digging my grave. The turning point came 2 weeks ago. Mark had to go to a real estate conference in Chicago for 3 days. He made a big show of preparing meals for me, labeling everything in the fridge. "Emily will come by to check on you," he said, packing his suitcase. "And I pre-made your tea. It's in the pitcher in the fridge. Just heat a cup up before bed." He kissed me goodbye, looking at me with those soulful, lying eyes. "I hate leaving you like this." The first night he was gone, I heated the tea. But as I carried it to the living room, I tripped over the rug, my coordination was shot, and spilled the entire mug onto the hardwood floor. It shattered. I was too exhausted to clean it up properly, so I just threw a towel over the mess and went to bed without it. I expected to toss and turn. I expected the insomnia that Mark said was part of my condition. Instead, I slept. I slept deeply, peacefully, without the weird, vivid nightmares that had been plaguing me. When I woke up the next morning, the sun was streaming in, and for the first time in months, my head felt clear. The fog wasn't gone, but it had lifted. I didn't feel like I was underwater. I remembered to feed the cat. I remembered that it was trash day. I walked to the kitchen and made coffee. Real coffee, not the herbal stuff Mark insisted on. I felt alive. Maybe the rest is working, I thought. That evening, I decided to skip the tea again. I just didn't like the taste, and I was feeling good. The second morning, I felt even better. I actually put on jeans and makeup. I drove, to the grocery store. I felt confident. But then Mark came home. He walked in the door, suitcases in hand, and stopped dead when he saw me. I was in the kitchen, making a lasagna. I was singing. "Sarah?" He looked disappointed. No, that's not the right word. He looked alarmed. "You're up? Cooking?" "I feel great, Mark." I beamed, rushing to hug him. "I think the break did me good. My head feels so much clearer." He stiffened in my embrace. "That's amazing, honey. But be careful. The doctor said you have rally days before a crash. You shouldn't overdo it." He immediately went into caregiver mode. He made me sit down. He took over the cooking. And that night, he made the tea fresh. You need to keep up the regimen, he insisted. You don't want to regress. I drank it. Because I wanted to please him. Because I wanted to believe he was right. Within 20 minutes, the heavy, dark curtain fell over my brain again. My words started slurring. I stumbled up the stairs. See? Mark's voice floated from far away. I told you. You overdid it. But the seed had been planted. The next day, through the haze, a thought nagged at me. Why did I get better when he was gone? Why did I get sick immediately after the tea? I wasn't ready to believe he was poisoning me. That was too monstrous. But I was suspicious. I started watching him. Really watching him. I noticed that he never drank the tea. He always had a glass of scotch or water. I noticed that when Emily came over, they would stop talking the moment I entered the room. Then came the trash can incident. It was a Thursday. Mark had taken the main trash out, but he forgot the small bin in his home office. I went in there to dust, trying to be useful, and I knocked the bin over. Among the crumpled papers and receipts, I saw a small, silver blister pack. It was empty. I picked it up. The writing was tiny, and it wasn't English. It looked like Spanish or Portuguese. Pentobarbital sódico. I frowned. Mark didn't have a heart condition. He didn't take medication. I pocketed the wrapper. Later that afternoon, Emily came over for tea and sympathy. She was wearing a high-necked sweater, but the room was warm, and she tugged at the collar. For a split second, I saw a glint of white. Pearls. I froze. That's a lovely necklace, Em, I said, my voice trembling slightly. She quickly pulled the collar up. Oh, just some costume jewelry I picked up at Target. Cheap stuff. But I knew those pearls. They were perfectly round, with a distinct rose clasp. They were my mother's pearls. The ones I had lost 2 weeks ago. The ones Mark had helped me look for, turning the house upside down, before telling me I must have thrown them away by accident in a fit of confusion. I must have thrown them away, I had cried that night, hating myself. But there they were. Around my sister's neck. My heart went cold. It wasn't confusion. It wasn't dementia. It was theft. And if they were stealing my jewelry, what else were they taking? I excused myself, ran to the bathroom, and locked the door. I pulled out my phone and typed the name on the blister pack into Google. Pentobarbital sodium, a short-acting barbiturate. Used as a pre-anesthetic, and for euthanasia in veterinary medicine. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. Euthanasia. They weren't just drugging me to make me sleep. They were drugging me with something used to kill animals. I looked at my reflection in the mirror. My pupils were dilated. My skin was gray. I looked like a dying woman. I just needed something to wake me up. And that fear, that pure, icy terror, was the wake-up call I needed. I wasn't sick. I was being murdered. Slowly. By the two people I loved most. I flushed the toilet to cover the sound of my sobbing. But I didn't sob for long. I wiped my face. I stood up straight. Okay, I whispered to the mirror. You want to play games? Let's play. Knowing is one thing. Proving it is another. I knew I had to be smart. If I accused them now, with dementia on my medical record, I would be institutionalized within the hour. Mark held my medical power of attorney. I had signed it a month ago, in a drug-induced haze, thinking it was an insurance form. I needed hard evidence. That night, the performance of my life began. Mark brought the tea. Here you go, sweetheart. Drink up. I took the mug. My hands were shaking, but I pretended it was the tremor he had convinced me I had. Thank you, Mark. You're so good to me. I brought the cup to my lips. The steam rose, carrying that sickly sweet chamomile scent that now smelled like death to me. I tilted the cup, but I kept my lips tight. I let a tiny bit of liquid touch my lip, then pulled back, making a swallowing sound. "Is it too hot?" Mark asked, watching me closely. He was hovering. He always hovered until I finished it. "Just a bit," I said. "I think I'll let it cool on the nightstand while I wash my face." "Okay, but don't forget it. You need your sleep." I went into the bathroom. I had prepared a plastic Ziploc bag earlier, hiding it in the sleeve of my bathrobe. I turned on the faucet loudly. I poured half the tea into the sink, washing it away. Then I poured a little bit into the bag and sealed it tight, shoving it deep into my pocket. I came back out, holding the half-empty cup. I drank most of it, I mumbled, acting like my words were already getting heavy. "It was good." "Good girl," Mark smiled. It was the smile of a predator. I poured the rest into the potted ficus tree in the corner of the bedroom. Then, I got into bed and waited. I counted to 20 minutes. Then I let my eyelids droop. I slurred my words. "Mark. I feel funny." "It's just the medicine working, Sarah. Go to sleep." I lay there, awake, for hours, listening to him breathe. It was torture. My body was screaming for movement, but I lay corpse still. The next morning, the ficus tree had yellow spots on its leaves. By the evening, the leaves were drooping. "Looks like the plant is sick too," Mark noted casually. "Maybe it's something in the air in this house." "Yeah," I thought. I needed to get that sample tested. But I couldn't drive to my usual doctor. Mark was listed on all my HIPAA forms. He would be notified. I remembered an old friend from college, Brenda. She worked at an urgent care clinic 3 towns over, about an hour's drive. I waited until Mark left for a client meeting, which I now suspected was a rendezvous with Emily. "I'm going to take a nap," I told him on the phone. "I feel terrible today." "Okay, honey. Stay in bed. I'll be back at 6. As soon as his Ford truck pulled out of the driveway, I was moving. I grabbed my purse, the baggie of tea, and a sample of my own urine I had collected that morning. Driving was terrifying. I hadn't driven in 2 months. I stuck to the back roads, my knuckles white on the steering wheel, constantly checking the rearview mirror to see if Mark was following me. Every black truck made my heart stop. I made it to the clinic. I was sweating, looking disheveled. "Sarah?" Brenda looked shocked when she saw me. "My God, you look thin." "Brenda, I need a favor." "A huge one." "And you can't tell anyone?" "Not even insurance." I handed her the samples. "Test me for barbiturates. And test this liquid for anything toxic." "Sarah, what is going on? Is Mark hitting you?" "Worse," I said grimly. "Just run the tests. Please. I'll pay cash." I sat in the sterile waiting room, shaking. What if I was wrong? What if I really was just sick and paranoid? Part of me, the part that still loved the man I married, hoped I was crazy. Because being crazy was better than being betrayed like this. 40 minutes later, Brenda came back. She wasn't smiling. She looked pale. She held a piece of paper. "Sarah," she said, her voice low. "We need to go to the ER. Or the police." "Tell me," I demanded. "Your urine screen is positive for pentobarbital and a high level of benzodiazepines. The liquid in the bag, it's a cocktail. High-grade veterinary sedatives mixed with crushed antipsychotics. Sarah, this dosage, if you took this every night, it would cause cumulative organ damage. It mimics the symptoms of dementia and stroke. Eventually, your heart would just stop." My knees gave out. I sank into the plastic chair. Confirmation. It was real. The man I had shared my bed with, the the man I had planned to grow old with, was actively, methodically killing me. "He's trying to kill me," I whispered. "We're calling the cops." Brenda reached for the phone. "No." I grabbed her hand. "No cops. Not yet. Are you insane? He's poisoning you. If I call the cops now, he'll claim it was an accident, or that I took them myself. He's been setting this up for months, Brenda. Everyone thinks I'm suicidal and confused. He'll spin this. He has a lawyer. He has my sister." "Your sister?" Brenda gasped. "I need undeniable proof," I said, a cold resolve settling over me. "I need to catch him doing it. I need to know why. I took the lab results." "Don't file this." "Not yet. Keep a copy safe for me." "Sarah, you can't go back there." "I have to. I have to finish the play." Driving back home was the hardest thing I've ever done. I was driving back to a house of horrors. But I had a weapon now. I had the truth. I got home 10 minutes before Mark did. I poured the nap tea down the sink. I ruffled my hair to look sleepy. When Mark came in, I was sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the wall. "Hey, sleepyhead," he said cheerfully. "Did you rest?" "Yes," I lied. "I dreamed about Mom and Dad. They told me to watch out for the weeds in the garden." Mark laughed. "Weeds. Right. Crazy dreams. Laugh while you can, Mark," I thought. "The weeds are about to strangle you." The medical proof was the gun. Now I needed the motive. I knew about the land, but why now? Mark had always enjoyed the money the estate brought in. Why the sudden rush to eliminate me? The answer lay in his home office. Mark was meticulous about his office. He kept it locked. Client confidentiality, he claimed. But 2 days after the clinic visit, fate handed me a key. Literally. Mark was in the shower. He liked long, hot showers in the morning. I saw his keys sitting on the kitchen counter. He had forgotten them in his rush to get the coffee started. I grabbed them. My heart was in my throat. I tiptoed to the office door. I tried the small silver key. Click. The door swung open. The room smelled of his expensive cologne and stale cigar smoke. I went straight to his computer. It was a sleek iMac. I tapped the spacebar. Password required. Damn it. I tried his birthday. Incorrect. I tried our anniversary. Incorrect. I tried password 123. Incorrect. I had about 10 minutes before he got out of the shower. Panic started to rise. Think, Sarah. What does a narcissist love? Himself. His car. I tried Mustang 67. The screen unlocked. I didn't waste time celebrating. I opened his email client. My eyes scanned the inbox. There were dozens of emails from Emily J. Subject lines like, "Did she take it? Timeline, Mexico listings." I opened one from last week. From Emily to Mark. Subject, "Debts are calling Mark, the loan sharks are getting impatient. They said if we don't have the $500,000 by December 1st, they're going to break my legs. And your investors regarding the failed mall project are threatening to go to the SEC. We need to liquidate Sarah's assets now. Stop playing safe with the dosage. Ramp it up." I felt cold all over. It wasn't just greed. It was desperation. Mark had blown money, likely on bad investments and gambling, and Emily was in debt up to her eyeballs. They were drowning, and I was their life raft. Or rather, my death was their life raft. I clicked on the sent folder. There was an email to a lawyer named J.P. Morgan, not the bank, a sleazy local guy. Subject, "Power of attorney activation. James, Sarah's condition has deteriorated as expected. I have the medical evaluations ready. We are prepared to have her declared mentally incompetent next week. Prepare the sale documents for the estate. We have a buyer lined up for the land, Vertex Developers. Cash offer, $5 million. We need to close before Christmas. My parents' land. The orchards. The farmhouse where I grew up. They were going to pave it over for a strip mall or condos. And they were going to use the money to pay off loan sharks and run away to Mexico. And there was one more folder. Labeled The Aftermath. I hesitated before clicking it. Inside were browsing history links and bookmarks. Assisted living facilities with low security. Cremation services cost. How long for barbiturates to leave the bloodstream? They weren't just planning to lock me up. The low-security facility and cremation searches suggested they expected me to die shortly after being admitted. An accident at the facility. A fall down the stairs. I was shaking so hard I could barely hold the mouse. I took my phone out and started taking pictures of the screen. Click. 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 Every email. Every incriminating search. Suddenly, I heard the water stop upstairs. He was out of the shower. I quickly closed the windows. I locked the computer. I grabbed the keys. I backed out of the room, locking the door behind me. I placed the keys back on the counter exactly where they were, next to the fruit bowl. I ran to the living room and grabbed a magazine, throwing myself onto the sofa just as Mark walked down the stairs, towel drying his hair. "Morning," he said, looking fresh and clean. "You're up early." "Couldn't sleep," I mumbled, keeping my eyes on the magazine. It was upside down. I flipped it quickly. "Did you make coffee?" he asked, walking past the keys on the counter. He didn't notice a thing. "No, I forgot how," I said, playing the part. "Oh, Sarah," he sighed, a sound of fake pity. "Don't worry. I'll make it." As he turned his back to grind the beans, I looked at him with pure hatred. I had the medical proof. I had the financial motive. But I realized something terrifying. The emails said they wanted to ramp it up and close before Christmas. Today was November 20th. I didn't have much time. I had to act fast. But I couldn't do it alone. I needed an ally. Someone who knew the law, someone who hated bullies, and someone who wasn't afraid of a fight. I needed David. David Thorne was my high school sweetheart, long before Mark came into the picture. We had broken up amicably when we went to different colleges, but we remained friends. He had become a ruthless corporate lawyer, the kind people hired when they wanted to destroy their enemies, not just sue them. We hadn't spoken in 2 years, mostly because Mark was jealous of him. Mark called him the shark. Well, I needed a shark. I called him from a burner phone I bought at Walmart with cash. "David Thorne," he answered, his voice deep and professional. "David, it's Sarah. Don't hang up. And don't use my name." There was a pause. "Sarah? You sound different. I heard you were sick." "I'm not sick. I'm being poisoned. And I need your help to bury the people doing it." Silence. "Then, meet me at the old diner on Route 9. 1 hour. Wear a hat." I sneaked out again while Mark was showing a house, probably at Emily's apartment. The diner was empty. David was sitting in a back booth. He looked older, grayer, but his eyes were sharp. I slid into the booth and threw the manila envelope on the table. It contained the lab results and the printed photos of the emails. "Read," I said. He read. His face went from curious to stony to furious. A vein pulsed in his temple. When he finished, he looked at me. "I'm going to kill him." "No," I said. "I don't want him dead. I want him destroyed. I want him to lose everything. The money, the reputation, the freedom. And I want Emily to go down with him." David took a deep breath. This is airtight for a divorce, Sarah. But for criminal charges? Attempted murder? Fraud? We need a smoking gun. The emails are good, but he could claim you hacked his computer and planted them. The drugs, he could claim you're an addict and he was trying to wean you off. What do we need? We need to catch him in the act. We need video of him drugging the tea. We need audio of them conspiring. We need the handover of the deed. The deed. I realized. They're planning to get me to sign the transfer soon. That's our trap, David smiled, a cold, predatory smile. Let them think they're winning. Let them think you're completely gone. We need to install cameras in your house. How? He's always there. Tonight, David said. I have a guy. A private investigator. Former FBI. He can get in and out in 10 minutes. Can you get Mark out of the house? I can try. Emily usually calls him around 9 p.m. Good. You leave the back door unlocked. My guy will plant micro cameras in the bedroom, the kitchen, and the office. Cloud recording. Real-time access. And then? And then, David leaned in, you continue to be the victim. You let them execute their plan. You let them bring the deed to you. You let them think they have one. And just when they think the ink is dry, we strike. He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You are brave, Sarah. Braver than anyone I know. Can you hold on for a few more days? I can hold on, I said. I've been drinking invisible poison for 3 months. I can survive a few more days. I drove home feeling stronger than I had in years. I had an army now. That night, everything went according to plan. I faked a tantrum around 8:30 p.m., throwing a fit about imaginary spiders. Mark, frustrated, went outside to call Emily to vent. While he was on the porch, a shadow slipped through the back door. It was David's guy. He was a ghost. He nodded to me, planted a tiny device in the kitchen light fixture, one on the bookshelf in the living room, and vanished upstairs to the bedroom. He was gone before Mark hung up the phone. Now, the house was wired. Every word Mark said, every drop of poison he poured, was being recorded in high definition on a secure server in David's office. I went to bed that night knowing that the eyes of justice were watching. And that brings us back to tonight. To the deed. To the betrayal at 2 a.m. I lay in bed, the memory of David's plan echoing in my mind. Wait for the signature, he had said. Wait until the crime is fully committed. Mark and Emily had the papers. They had the intent. But they hadn't forced my signature yet. The sun was coming up now. I could hear Mark stirring. He stretched, yawning, oblivious to the fact that his life was effectively over. Morning, beautiful, he said, turning to me. How did you sleep? I opened my eyes. I looked at him. I let a vacant, confused expression wash over my face. Mark? I rasped. Where am I? He smiled. You're home, honey. You're home. He got out of bed, whistling. Big day today, Sarah, he called from the bathroom. Emily is coming over for dinner. And we have some paperwork to sort out. Boring stuff, but we need to get it done. Okay, I whispered. Tonight was the night. They were going to force me to sign. I got up and walked to the window. I looked out at my land. The morning mist was rising off the orchards. It was beautiful. Enjoy it while you can, Mark, I whispered to the glass. Because tonight, the fog lifts. And tonight, I take back what is mine. The cameras were live. The trap was set. But before the final act, Mark and Emily decided they needed one last rehearsal. They needed to parade Crazy Sarah in front of an audience one last time to cement their alibi. If neighbors and friends saw me drooling and incoherent just hours before I signed away my fortune, no one would question the legality of the transfer. They would call it a mercy. That evening, Mark organized what he called an intimate dinner. He invited Mrs. Gable from next door, the local pastor, Reverend Thomas, and a couple from his old college days, Greg and Linda. Solid, respectable people. People whose testimony would hold up in court. I spent the afternoon in the guest room, watching the live feed from the kitchen on my burner phone while Mark thought I was napping. "Make sure she looks disheveled," Emily told Mark as she chopped vegetables with my favorite knife. "Don't brush her hair. Put her in that old, stained cardigan." "Way ahead of you," Mark laughed, popping a grape into his mouth. "I dissolved 3 pills in her orange juice at lunch. She's going to be a zombie tonight. It'll be sad, really. Poor Sarah, losing her mind in front of everyone." "I can't wait to see the look on Linda's face," Emily sneered. "She always looked down on me. Now I'm about to be worth $5 million and her husband is still driving a Honda." I gripped the phone so hard the screen almost cracked. They weren't just thieves, they were sadists. They enjoyed this. When the guests arrived at 6 p.m., Mark came to get me. I was ready. I had thrown the drugged orange juice into the toilet hours ago. I was sober. I was sharp. But I had to play the part of the broken doll one last time. I messed up my own hair. I buttoned my cardigan wrong. I let my eyes go unfocused. Mark led me down the stairs, gripping my arm a little too tight, like a jailer. "Here she is," Mark announced to the room, his voice dripping with faux sympathy. "She's having a rough day, everyone, so please be gentle." "Oh, Sarah," Mrs. Gable gasped, bringing a hand to her mouth. "You poor dear." I stumbled a little, and Mark caught me, making a show of his strength. "I've got you, honey. I've always got you." Dinner was a nightmare. I sat at the head of the table, my table, while Emily sat to my right, acting like the lady of the manor. She poured the wine. She directed the conversation. She treated me like a child who shouldn't be heard. "Sarah, do you remember Reverend Thomas?" Emily asked loudly, enunciating every word like I was deaf. I stared at the Reverend. I remembered that he cheated on his taxes and had a secret gambling problem, things my father had told me years ago. But I just blinked. "Who?" I whispered. Mark sighed loudly. "It's okay, Reverend. She doesn't remember much these days. Last week she forgot who I was." "Tragic," Greg muttered, shaking his head. "Just tragic." Then came the soup course. Mark had placed a bowl of tomato bisque in front of me. As I reached for my spoon, I saw Emily nudge my elbow under the table. It was subtle, but forceful. My hand jerked. The bowl tipped. Red soup splashed all over the white tablecloth and down the front of my sweater. "Oh, God!" Emily cried out, jumping up. "Sarah! Look what you've done." I didn't." I stammered, shrinking back. It's okay," Mark rushed over, dabbing at me with a napkin, but he was smearing it, making it worse. "She doesn't have the motor control anymore. It's the degenerative nerves." "Maybe she should eat in the kitchen?" Linda suggested, wrinkling her nose. "It might be easier for her." "In the kitchen. Like a dog. Like a servant in my own house." "No," Mark said heroically. "She's my wife. She stays." He looked at me with eyes that said, "Look at you, you pathetic mess." I sat there, soup staining my chest, tears of humiliation welling up. But deep down, behind the mask of the confused old woman, I was memorizing every face. I was recording every slight. "Keep pushing, Mark," I thought. "Fill the balloon until it pops." After dinner, Mark led the men to the study for cigars, leaving me with the women in the living room. "It must be so hard for you, Emily," Linda said, sipping her Chardonnay. "Taking care of her." "It is," Emily sighed, fake tears glistening in her eyes. She gets violent sometimes, you know? She accuses us of stealing. She thinks we're poisoning her. The doctor says it's classic paranoia associated with dementia. Paranoia, Mrs. Gable nodded. My aunt had that. Accused the mailman of being a spy. Exactly, Emily nodded. That's why we have to transition her. For her own safety. Transition her? Mrs. Gable asked. To a facility, Emily lowered her voice. Mark signed the papers today. It's a beautiful place. Very secure. We're moving her tomorrow. Tomorrow. So that was the timeline. Tonight I sign the deed. Tomorrow I disappear into a locked ward. And the day after, I probably fall in the shower and break my neck. I let my head loll to the side, drooling a little, playing the vegetable. Pretty pearls, I mumbled, pointing at Emily's neck. Mommy's pearls. Emily froze. Her hand flew to her throat. Oh, Sarah, she laughed nervously. Mom gave these to me years ago. Don't you remember? Mommy's pearls, I repeated, louder this time. She's having an episode. Emily stood up quickly. I think it's time for bed, Sarah. She hauled me up. Her grip was bruising. She marched me to the stairs, pinching my arm where no one could see. Shut up, you old hag, she hissed in my ear as we climbed the stairs. One more night. Just one more night and I never have to look at your saggy face again. She shoved me into the bedroom. Mark was already there, waiting. The guests had left. The performance was over. Now, it was just the three of us. And the hidden cameras. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. The pretense of care vanished. Mark locked the bedroom door. Emily went straight to the safe and pulled out the manila folder again. Is the notary coming? Emily asked. He's waiting in his car down the street, Mark said, loosening his tie. He's on the payroll. He doesn't care if she's conscious or not, as long as the ink hits the paper. Good. Let's get her ready. Mark walked over to the nightstand. He didn't bother with the tea tonight. He pulled a syringe and a small vial from his pocket. What is that? Emily asked. A booster, Mark said, tapping the syringe. Ketamine mixed with a sedative. I need her pliable, but awake enough to hold a pen. If she's totally out, the signature will look like a scribble. It needs to look somewhat legitimate. My blood ran cold. Ketamine. That was a dissociative anesthetic. If he injected me with that, I wouldn't be able to fight. I wouldn't be able to speak. I would be trapped in my own body while they used my hand to sign away my life. I had to time this perfectly. I was sitting on the edge of the bed, slumped over. Mark approached me with the needle. Sarah, honey, he said, his voice flat and businesslike. I need you to take your medicine. It's a shot tonight. For your vitamins. I saw the needle glint in the lamplight. David, where are you? I prayed. I had texted David the code word, dinner, when the guests arrived. That meant the police were supposed to be in position around the perimeter. But they wouldn't storm in until I gave the signal or until they saw imminent danger on the cameras. Was a needle imminent danger? I decided not to find out. I couldn't let him inject me. As Mark leaned in, I did something clumsy. I flailed my arm, hitting the nightstand lamp. It crashed to the floor, the bulb shattering with a loud pop. The room plunged into semi-darkness, lit only by the hallway light creeping under the door and the moonlight. Damn it, Sarah! Mark yelled. Hold her down, Emily. Emily lunged at me, pinning my shoulders to the mattress. She was strong, stronger than she looked. Her nails dug into my skin. Do it, Mark. Stick her. I can't see a vein. Mark was fumbling with his phone flashlight. Just do it in the muscle. Hurry. I was fighting now, not fully, but enough to make it difficult. I needed to delay. I needed them to put the pen in my hand before the drugs. David said we needed the attempt to force the signature. Fine. Mark growled. He abandoned the needle for a second. Forget the shot. She's weak enough. Let's just get the signature. If it looks shaky, we'll say she had a tremor. Hand me the clipboard. Emily let go of one of my arms to grab the folder. Mark shoved the clipboard onto my lap. Sarah, he said, his voice dropping to a menacing growl. Sign the paper. Right here. He jammed a pen into my hand. He wrapped his fingers around mine, forcing a grip. I looked down at the paper. General warranty deed. Grantor, Sarah Jenkins. Grantee, Jenkins Holdings LLC. I don't want to, I whimpered, letting my voice tremble. Sign it. Emily shrieked. Sign it, you stupid cow. Mark. I looked up at him, tears streaming down my face, real tears this time, tears of pure adrenaline. Why are you doing this? Because you're useless, Sarah, Mark spat, his face inches from mine. You're a relic. You're sitting on a gold mine and you want to grow organic pumpkins. I deserve this money. I put up with you for 20 years. I earned every penny. And me? I looked at Emily. I'm your sister. You were always Dad's favorite, Emily hissed. Sarah the smart one. Sarah the successful one. Well, now you're Sarah the vegetable. Sign the damn paper. Mark grabbed my hand again. He began to force the pen to the paper. The tip touched the line. That's it, he whispered. Just a little scribble. This was it. The crime was in progress. Coercion. Fraud. Assault. I felt the pen moving against my will. The S was forming. Now. I stopped my hand. Mark pushed harder. Don't fight me, Sarah. I didn't just stop. I pushed back. Mark frowned. He tried to force my hand down, but my wrist, strengthened by 20 years of hauling crates and digging soil, locked into place. I wasn't the frail invalid they thought I was. I was a farmer's daughter. I raised my head. I stopped the trembling. I stopped the drooling. I looked Mark dead in the eye. My gaze was steady, cold, and lucid. No, I said. The word hung in the air like a gunshot. It wasn't a whisper. It was a command. Mark froze. He blinked, confused. What? I said no, I repeated, my voice dropping an octave, losing all traces of the slurry, medicated fog. I'm not signing anything, Mark. And you're not going to Mexico. Emily gasped behind me. Mark, what's happening? Did you give her the wrong dose? Mark stared at me, his mouth opening and closing. You're awake. I've been awake for 3 days, I said, sitting up straight and shoving the clipboard off my lap. It clattered to the floor. I've been awake since I found the pills in your office trash. Since I found the emails to your shark lawyer. Since I watched you give my mother's pearls to this traitor. I pointed a finger at Emily. She recoiled as if I had burned her. You knew? Mark whispered, his face draining of color. The arrogance was vanishing, replaced by a dawning, terrifying realization. I know everything, I said, swinging my legs off the bed and standing up. I towered over him now. I know about the ketamine. I know about the loan sharks. I know about the facility you booked for me. I know you've been poisoning my tea since September. Mark took a step back, bumping into the dresser. His eyes darted to the syringe on the nightstand. Don't even think about it, I warned. Unless you want to add assault on a police officer to your list of charges. Police? Mark laughed nervously, a high-pitched, hysterical sound. You're bluffing. You're crazy. No one will believe you. You have a documented history of dementia. Do I? I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. Or do I have a documented history of being gaslit by a sociopath? Why don't we ask them? I looked directly at the smoke detector on the ceiling. Then I looked at the bookshelf. David? I said clearly to the room. I think we have enough. Mark followed my gaze. Who are you talking to? Suddenly, a voice boomed from the hallway. Not David's voice. A voice amplified by a megaphone. Police. Search warrant. Nobody move. The front door downstairs crashed open with a deafening boom. Heavy boots thundered on the stairs. Thump 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 thump. Mark's face went from pale to gray. No. No. Emily screamed. A shrill, piercing shriek. She bolted for the balcony doors. Emily, stop. Mark yelled, but he was frozen. Emily fumbled with the lock, tears streaming down her face. She got the door open just as the bedroom door kicked in. 3 police officers in tactical gear burst into the room, guns drawn. Behind them walked Detective Miller, and right beside him, wearing a trench coat and the smuggest grin I have ever seen, was David Thorne. Drop the weapon, one officer screamed at Mark, pointing his rifle at the syringe on the table. Mark threw his hands up. It's medicine. It's just vitamins. Get on the ground. Now. Mark Jenkins, the man who thought he was a king, crumpled. He dropped to his knees, sobbing. She's crazy. She's lying. It's all a misunderstanding. 2 officers grabbed him, forcing his face into the carpet. The sound of handcuffs ratcheting shut, click click click, was the sweetest music I had ever heard. Another officer ran to the balcony and grabbed Emily just as she was trying to climb over the railing. She was kicking and screaming like a toddler. Get off me. He made me do it. Mark made me do it. I didn't want to hurt her. Save it for the judge, lady, the officer grunted, dragging her back inside. The room was chaos. Radios crackling, Mark sobbing, Emily screaming accusations. But in the center of the storm, I stood perfectly still. David walked over to me. He looked at the shattered lamp, the scattered papers, the syringe. Then he looked at me. Are you okay? He asked gently. I looked at my husband, handcuffed on the floor, snot running down his face. I looked at my sister, cowering in the corner. I took a deep breath. The air tasted clean. I'm fine, David, I said. Actually, I've never been better. Detective Miller stepped forward. He was a gruff man with kind eyes. Mrs. Jenkins? I'm Detective Miller. We've been watching the feed for the last hour. We have everything recorded. The assault, the coercion, the confession. It's all there. He picked up the syringe with a gloved hand and placed it in an evidence bag. And this is going to put him away for a very long time. Mark lifted his head from the carpet. Sarah, please. Baby. I'm sick. I have a gambling problem. I need help. Don't let them take me. I love you. I walked over to him. I knelt down so our faces were level. You don't love me, Mark, I said softly. You love my money. And you love yourself. But here's the funny thing about crazy Sarah. I leaned closer, whispering so only he could hear. Crazy Sarah was smart enough to transfer the liquid assets to a blind trust 3 days ago. Even if I had signed that paper, you would have gotten nothing. 0. You were fighting for an empty shell. His eyes widened in horror. It wasn't the jail time that broke him. It was the realization that he had been outsmarted. That the money was never within his reach. Get him out of here, I said to the officers, standing up and turning my back on him. As they dragged him out, he started screaming obscenities. But I didn't flinch. I walked over to Emily. She was trembling, the pearls still around her neck. "Sarah." She wept. "I'm sorry. I was jealous. I wanted to be like you." I reached out and unclasped the necklace. I pulled it gently from her neck. "You could never be like me, Emily," I said, putting the pearls in my pocket. "Because I would never sell my family for a paycheck." "Take her," I signaled the officer. Within 5 minutes, the room was empty. The sirens faded into the distance. I was alone in my bedroom. The mess was still there. The broken lamp. The spilled tea. David stood in the doorway. "We need to go to the station for your statement. And get you checked out by a real doctor." "I know," I said. "Just, give me 1 minute." I walked to the window where I had stood this morning. The sun had set, and the moon was rising over the orchards. My land. My home. It was still mine. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was a survivor. And God help anyone who tried to take what was mine ever again. The next 48 hours were a whirlwind of legal procedures, medical exams, and revelations that shook our small town to its core. I spent 6 hours at the hospital. They pumped my stomach, just to be safe, and ran a full toxicology panel. The results were terrifying. The levels of arsenic, yes, arsenic, which they had started adding the last few days, were low but present. If I had continued for another week, my kidneys would have failed. But the real drama was happening at the police station. David, being the shark that he is, managed to get me access to watch the interrogation recordings. He argued that as the victim and the primary witness, I needed to identify inconsistencies. The truth was, he knew I needed closure. Watching Mark in that gray, windowless room was a revelation. Without his suits, without his cologne, without his power over me, he was pathetic. It was all her idea. Mark shouted at Detective Miller, slamming his handcuffed fists on the table. "Emily. She's the one who got the drugs. She's a nurse practitioner, she has access to the restricted meds. I just wanted to get Sarah help. Emily said if we sedated her, we could get her into a treatment center. So you decided to sell her $5 million estate to pay off your gambling debts as part of her treatment?" Miller asked dryly, tossing a stack of betting slips on the table. "We found these in your safe, Mark. You owe 300 grand to a bookie in Vegas. And another 200 to a loan shark in Chicago." Mark went pale. "And we have the emails," Miller continued. "The ones where you discuss ramping up the dosage. The ones where you call your wife a cash cow. That doesn't sound like a concerned husband. That sounds like attempted murder." Mark crumbled. He started weeping, curled into a ball. Then came Emily's tape. If Mark was pathetic, Emily was vicious. "He promised me," she shrieked. "He promised me $1 million. He said Sarah was dying anyway. He told me she had a brain tumor and didn't want to tell anyone. He said we were just speeding up the inevitable to save the estate from taxes." "So you admit to administering the drugs?" Miller asked. "He made me. He said he'd kill me if I didn't help." Funny, Miller pressed play on the audio recording from my bedroom. The recording from the night of the deed. Emily's voice filled the room. "Sign it, you stupid cow. Stick her, Mark. Just do it in the muscle." Emily stopped screaming. She stared at the recorder, her mouth open. "That doesn't sound like a woman under duress," Miller said. "That sounds like a co-conspirator. You're looking at 20 years, Emily. Unless what? Unless you testify against him. Tell us about the other women." That was the bombshell. David paused the video. "Sarah, you need to hear this. It turned out I wasn't the first. Mark had been married before, 25 years ago, in another state. His first wife had died in a boating accident. Life insurance payout, $500,000. It had been ruled accidental. But now, with Emily's testimony and the pattern of poisoning, they were reopening that case. My husband wasn't just a thief. He was a serial predator. And I was the one who finally caught him. The news hit the papers the next day. Local businesswoman survives poison plot. Husband and sister arrested. My phone blew up. The friends who had ignored me, the people who had whispered about poor crazy Sarah, were suddenly calling, apologizing, begging for forgiveness. I didn't know. Linda sobbed on the voicemail. He told us you were dangerous. I deleted the messages. I didn't need their apologies. I knew who my real friends were. David. Brenda. Mrs. Gable, who had actually called the police separately that night because she saw the shadows on the balcony. The evidence was overwhelming. The video of Mark crushing pills. The audio of their plot. The toxicology report. The forged medical records. David filed a civil suit alongside the criminal charges. We froze Mark's assets, what little he had. We sued Emily for emotional distress and breach of fiduciary duty. But the most satisfying moment was finding the power of attorney document Mark had forged months ago. It was the linchpin of his plan. David held it up in his office. This is what he used to talk to your doctors. This is how he isolated you. He handed me a lighter. Do the honors, he said. I lit the corner of the paper. I watched my husband's signature, that arrogant, looping scrawl, turn to ash and smoke. It's over, I said. Not yet, David warned. Now comes the trial. He's going to plead not guilty. He's going to try to charm the jury. He's going to say you're the master manipulator. Let him try, I said. I have the truth. And I have you. The trial lasted 3 weeks. It was the biggest event our county had seen in decades. The courtroom was packed every day. Mark showed up in a sharp suit, trying to look the part of the grieving, misunderstood husband. He smiled at the jury. He cried when his lawyer talked about his love for me. But his charm didn't work this time. Because every time he lied, David Thorne stood up and played a clip. Mark, I never drugged her. Video plays, Mark pouring powder into the chamomile tea. Mark, I never wanted her money. Email on screen, once the bitch signs, we are rich. Mark, I love her. Audio plays, one more night and I never have to look at her saggy face again. The jury didn't buy it for a second. When I took the stand, I was terrified. But then I looked at Mark. He was glaring at me with such pure, unadulterated hatred that my fear vanished. I told my story. I told them about the fog. The fear. The day I woke up and realized the man sleeping next to me was a monster. He didn't just try to kill me, I told the jury, looking directly at Mark. He tried to steal my mind. He tried to make me believe I was broken. That is a violation worse than death. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. When they came back, the courtroom was silent. We find the defendant, Mark Jenkins, guilty on all counts. Attempted murder in the first degree. Conspiracy to commit murder. Aggravated fraud. Elder abuse. Mark didn't scream. He just slumped in his chair, head in his hands. Then it was Emily's turn. She had taken a plea deal, testifying against Mark in exchange for a lighter sentence. But lighter still meant 15 years. When the judge asked if she had anything to say, she looked at me. She looked old. The prison jumpsuit washed her out. I just wanted the pearls, she whispered. I just wanted what you had. You had me, I said quietly, though I knew she couldn't hear me from the gallery. You had a sister who would have given you anything. The judge was merciless. Mark Jenkins, you are a predator of the worst kind. You preyed on trust. You weaponized love. I sentence you to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As the bailiffs hauled him away, he looked back at me one last time. He opened his mouth to speak, maybe to curse me, maybe to beg. I turned my back. I walked out of the courtroom, into the sunshine. Reporters were waiting. Cameras flashed. Microphones were shoved in my face. Sarah. Sarah. How do you feel? Do you have a statement? I stopped. I adjusted my sunglasses. I saw David standing by his car, smiling. Yes, I said to the cameras. I have a statement. I looked into the lens, imagining Mark watching this on the news in his cell. To every woman out there who thinks she's crazy or confused or too emotional. I paused. Trust your gut. Check the trash. And never, ever drink the tea if it tastes bitter. It's been a year since the verdict. The farmhouse is different now. I renovated. I tore out the carpet in the bedroom where he tried to kill me. I replaced it with hardwood. I painted the walls a bright, sunny yellow. I donated all of Mark's clothes to a homeless shelter. I sold his Mustang and used the money to build a new greenhouse. But the biggest change isn't the house. It's the purpose. I didn't sell the land to the developers. Instead, I expanded. I turned the Jenkins estate into a sanctuary. We call it the Second Harvest. It's a transitional home and workplace for women escaping domestic abuse and financial control. Women who, like me, were told they were crazy, useless, or broken. They come here. They work the land. They grow tomatoes, pumpkins, and herbs, real herbs, not poison. They learn how to manage their own finances. They learn legal self-defense from David, who volunteers here every Saturday. We heal together. I'm sitting on my porch right now, watching the sun go down. I have a cup of tea in my hand. Earl Grey. Hot. Safe. I'm 55 years old. I'm single. I have a scar on my heart that will never fully fade. I still have nightmares sometimes, where I can't move and Mark is standing over me with a needle. But then I wake up. I wake up in my own bed, in my own house, safe and sound. I hear laughter from the garden. It's the women. They're harvesting the late autumn squash. One of them, a young girl named Maria who escaped a husband who controlled every penny she spent, waves at me. Sarah. Come look at this pumpkin. It's huge. I wave back. Coming. I put down my tea. I stand up. My joints ache a little, real age this time, not poison, but I feel strong. I was almost a ghost story. I was almost a tragic headline. Wealthy widow dies of stroke, leaves fortune to husband. Instead, I'm the author of my own ending. To everyone watching this, evil doesn't always look like a monster. Sometimes it looks like a handsome husband with a cup of chamomile tea. Sometimes it looks like a smiling sister with a string of pearls. Pay attention. Listen to the silence. Trust your instincts. And if you ever find yourself pretending to sleep while the wolves are in the room, remember me. Wait for your moment. And when you open your eyes, make sure you burn their whole world down. I'm Sarah Jenkins. And I'm wide awake.